Howdy, of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Teen Wolf episodes from season 1, episode 5 and 6. So, going into these episodes, kind of a mixed, like, Dawson's Creek of a thing, where we kind of just, like, we're starting to really just forget about the whole, like, wolf part, really. Like, we get snidbits here and there. There's a moment where Derek is being attacked by Kate. But really, there's slim pickings here as far as action kind of sequences really go. So, and really, we're just to be taunted by the alpha through these episodes. Just be like, hey, like now that we finally built up this villain, now, excuse me, excuse me. Now we have to do something with it. Because now we're like, hey, we figured out what the villain is. Now we actually have to do things with this character and figure it all out. So, there's to be moments in this episode 5 where I'm just like, God, like, this is such a waste of time. There's some Allison and Scott moments where I'm just like, God, come on with this. Like, you could give me more story instead of, I'm gonna be walking in a park to get why. Let's walk around a park for a bulk of scenes because this show has no money. What is this show, like, gearing up these people to eventually be in a commercial somewhere? Because that's what it really feels like they're doing. Like, it's just like, hey, like, there's some shots here that, like, obviously feels like they're going to be in a commercial for something. Like, all I need to do is just see them, like, transition and have this, like, soap on a rope. Like, that's all that, like, that all of a sudden I'm going to have, like, Mentos being, like, popped into a scene somewhere. Because I'm like, why does this exist? Why are we going through this? Why are we continuing on? Why are we kind of filling time when there's so many stories to tell? But we have to kill time in this episode. I don't get it. But I'm being honest. Episode 6 is to basically be the Incredible Hulk story. Like, I think I kind of felt like, okay, they were going to do some heart rate things and Scott wasn't going to be able to get busy with Allison. But then I ended up finding out that it's like, okay, so they really actually go into talking about Incredible Hulk because luckily that movie happened, or they wouldn't have an idea for this episode. Episode 6. We also have this parent-teacher conference thing where it seems like these teachers are kind of much more of therapists than teachers. Do they forget, like, that these characters are to be teachers, where they probably don't even remember who half of their people are because they have to teach so many of them? That's usually obvious. Like, there's a lot of times where I would have been physically at a teacher's conference, and, like, the teacher won't even know who I am. That's bound to happen sometimes where they're just like, Joel, right? Or dude, right? You name you? I'm like, yes. Like, luckily I was the tall guy, so they remembered who I was. But not everybody was like that. Like, freaking teachers get a bad rap because they have to teach like a bajillion freaking students, and it's hard to remember everyone. And plus, it's hard to get a consensus of who students are. But man, I love the fact that none of these teachers were like these teachers that were at this show. Good God. I would have just been like, wow, like, thanks for therapeutically, like, telling my parents how you, like, are microscopically, whatever. That is a freaking joke. Anyways, so, going to these 2 episodes, there's some fun things, but also there is some just really just things that I also don't like about these episodes, like story-wise, or like we have to take a whole episode for there to be this heart monitor episode where you can just tell now, like, they're trying certain kind of things on certain episodes where they're taking one thing and just, like, dragging it on out. And I'm just like, okay, this is, like, so you're taking one story and dragging it out through the entire episode, and you've done that twice now. Like, okay, all right, it seems kind of lazy, but also here's the thing about this show It seems like this show does have money, but then you pull it back and you're like, okay, maybe this show doesn't have money. So eventually I'll see where eventually this lands with the whole money no money show thing. Because at least there are some CGI things that they do attempt in this episode, and there are spots where I'm just like, okay, maybe the show does have money. Maybe the show is going well. Maybe they do have some like stuff to throw out there. Like I think it is kind of a joke to put somebody in werewolf makeup for like 10 seconds of an entire show. I'm like, you know how much hours of makeup that probably would have taken to apply all that, and you're going to use like 10 seconds of that whole makeup applying process? Wow, that seems like a giant waste of a time. Like, we have Scott in one part of makeup, and he's in makeup for like 10 seconds, and then he changes back. And I'm like, what are we doing here? What was the point of putting on the makeup? He could have just had nails pop out, and that would have been it. Why did he have to be in full on makeup for 10 seconds of 2 episodes? This just doesn't, like, I'm like, that seems like a waste of resources. They're throwing money away for 10 seconds where Scott is to have makeup on in this show. Doesn't make sense, but what am I, like, to just say about it? It's MTV, I guess, who tossed this show together. So, let's just go into it. Let's go into spoilers about these episodes, because I've talked about it long enough. Like, I'm probably not even going to tee it up, because I technically almost have. I can also mention that it seems that we get some more tying into Derek's family, if we haven't already, in the show, where we have Peter Hale, that seems to be a consistent character. In this show, it seems that Derek is coming to Peter Hale because it's Laura's nephew, to just kind of talk to him and try to get some answers out of him in this episode. But it seems like we're getting closer to getting some answers, but a little bit of a patience. So we also kind of barely re-tie in Dr. Alan Dieter, which is to be the animal shelter's doctor guy. So, of course, you've seen him on Walking Dead. But yeah, like, it seems like Scott is just going to lose this job, even if he had this job. It seems like he's always going to be late for this job, or just not be at this job at all. Eventually, he's just going to get fired. I'm naturally assuming fairly soon, coming to theaters near you. So, let's just get in the episode. Let's go into that double 5 time territory, because it is spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I get to spoil this episode. So, for episode 5, I want to try to keep everything reined in, because I had this feeling that I want to talk about a bajillion number of things that probably aren't even in episode 5. It's probably in episode 6. So, let's go into it. So, episode 5, we really start episode 5 with both Jackson and Linda conveniently kind of hassling over which movie to watch. Jackson is talking about Hoosiers, the Gene Hackman movie, which I've seen and I think it's pretty good. And Linda is talking about, well, I don't want to watch that movie. I want to watch The Notebook for the 800th time. And so, of course, since Jackson is to obviously be a person that's like, dude, I want to win my woman over, because why wouldn't you be? Jackson goes to the movie store place to, I think there was a 2 something in the name. I don't remember what the name of the movie is. So, Jackson goes into this place to ask where the Notebook is. It seems that no one's working there, even though there was a guy that was to put in a light fixture. And then probably eat it, because the Alpha probably ate him. Because he was the only one, I guess, working at the store. So, Jackson comes in to going through the aisles, trying to figure out where the Notebook is. All of a sudden, the Alpha is in the store and knocks down some shelves. All of a sudden, Jackson, not quite quick enough, and gets stuck underneath one of the aisles, shelving units. So, the Alpha is to creep closer and closer to Jackson. Jackson should naturally assume that he's going to be dead. The Alpha goes and is to touch the leather jacket of Jackson to find out he has scratches, scrapes, or whichever. And so then the Alpha is to run off, smashing through the window, because evidently this werewolf has never heard of a door before. I wonder how he exactly got in there. Did he break a window to get in and then break a window to get out? Curious. That's one hole of logic there. How is it that the store clerk didn't see this werewolf come in here when he probably should have broken a window to get in there and broken a window to get out? Because evidently this werewolf can't tell anything of doors or windows or whichever. So, werewolf goes, breaks through the window, and Lydia is to scream. Evidently, she's to have her phone out, luckily, at a miraculous time to catch the footage of this said creature, which eventually Styles will find, and eventually Styles will delete. And there's a whole story with that. So, the sheriff and Styles are to get a call because Styles is in the sheriff's car. And so the sheriff is to eventually go to this call, like see what's what. And so the sheriff is just kind of checking on people and basically like kind of just figuring out what all has kind of happened, and then just kind of leaves. Not much you can really do. So like more and more, it just kind of feels like the sheriff is kind of like a helpless character that just can't do anything. And I'm just waiting for the sheriff to have this like break of a moment where he's just gonna like, God, like I can't do anything. Why am I even a sheriff here? Maybe I should give up my badge. So in this episode, the most important thing going on in this episode is that Allison is to supposedly have a birthday, but it seems like she's to be a year older than everyone else is to expect her to be. So all of a sudden, Allison is to boo-hoo cry about how a lot of people have complained about that she's older in school years. I'm like, I have gotten the same thing. So Allison, you're boo-hooing for whatever reason. It doesn't matter. Like, freaking, like, I had to move around a lot too. Like, I had to move around a lot. There was some unsavory teachers that led me to need to do certain of a class year over again, because there was to be a teacher that probably should have been fired for doing what she was doing, but I don't know and I don't really care. But yeah, so I ended up switching schools just because of a certain kind of teacher. So that was the reason why I had to get technically held back a year, because of a crappy teacher. But not all of them are crappy. It's just that one that was, let's just say, should have been fired. Anyways, pushing on. So Allison is to complain to Scott that, oh, everyone thinks I'm older, and they thought I was pregnant one year, or they thought that I was... Oh, so that's too bad. So Scott is to immediately say that she was to have moved so often, and that's why she lost a year. And so Allison is to kiss Scott because of that explanation, thinking of that, being much more smarter than I guess anyone else would. And so that leads Scott to tell Allison, like, hey, since it's your birthday, how about you just ditch an entire day of school with me? Because Scott is wanting to ditch a whole entire day of school because of his life being too hard. Because eventually Derek is going to want to team up with Scott to get his werewolfdom under control. If that's even a word, it's probably not. So it seems like Derek is wanting to team up with Scott. Then eventually he's like, well, I don't know if I can train you, because maybe it's impossible to train you. Eventually that leads us to episode 6. Because eventually he's like, yeah, we got to team up together, but like you got to also lose Allison. Maybe forever. episode 6. So we have both Scott and we have both Allison that are basically turning off their phones and just going to this park, walking all over this park, and bizarrely back and forth, tripping all over these rocks, kissing one another and tripping over these rocks. Man, is these scenes exciting. Like, if I could just have an entire season where we just have Scott and Allison just going through this park and tripping over rocks, like, that has to be the most important storyline of this entire thing that isn't a waste of time at all to watch because it should not exist. Like, they must have had nothing for writing this week. So it's like, hey, could you trip over a rock a lot more? Man, the director must have had a challenging week that week. Like, could you just look into one of their eyes, like, just 20 seconds longer? Because I need about, like, 20 minutes of film to just blow. Anyways, so Styles is to call consistently and try to get to have Scott answer, and Scott is just non-responsive. So Styles is to go to Lydia's home to just kind of like, hey, Lydia, who's all drugged, hey, how's it going? And so, like, Lydia's obviously just drugged out of her gourd. She's like, brr, brr. Where everything is supposedly a mountain lion to her, or a cougar or something. And because eventually Styles is to pick up a giraffe and say, what is this? She used to say, mountain lion. And it's like, no. So Styles is starting to ask Lydia questions, which is to lead Lydia to have her hand on Styles's knee. And Styles is like, oh, because I guess he's never been touched by a girl, because that's bound to happen, because Styles has never seemingly had a girlfriend within this show quite yet, which is sad, but eventually we might get a Styles-Lydia connection when something is to eventually happen to Jackson. Maybe Jackson is going to try to go for Allison, because that's where it seems like things are heading. Because Scott is trying to stay away from Allison because of the whole, like, I need to stay away from Allison. Anyways, pushing on. So Scott and Allison are to... so Styles is to eventually kind of check on Lydia's phone and find the photo, or find the video of the alpha. So Styles is to keep Lydia's phone and to try to call Scott numerous times to see what he should do about it. And so Styles just deletes that video off of Lydia's phone, but, like, he's doing it from his home. So Styles took Lydia's phone and didn't give it back to her. You would think he should have just sent that to his phone, deleted that whole thing ever happening, and then just could have just kept it on his phone, but instead he deletes it from off of her phone. Like, I just thought that was stupid. So, but yeah, there was to be one moment where Lydia was to almost go and get a little bit closer to Styles, but then eventually she ends up calling him Jackson instead. Am I even saying that correctly? Yeah, good God. I was like, am I even saying that character's name correctly? Anyways. So Styles is to try to call Scott. Scott has no give a crap whatsoever mentality at all. Even his boss is to tell him, like, hey, you're supposed to be at work, but you're not here for whatever reason. All of a sudden, the sheriff is to pop his head into the doctor's place and just kind of ask, like, some certain questions. We're starting to see that this doctor is fairly suspicious, even to where Derek is wanting a little bit of time with the doctor, let's just say, in these 2 episodes. So we have parent-teacher conferences, and supposedly Scott was to make his way to parent-teacher conferences, but he blew everything off. Like, I guess he was just like, man, if I can just get 85 more kisses with Allison, and me and her just walk through this entire park together, and me just forget about everything because this kid gets easily distracted by Allison, or just wanting to just easily get distracted by anything and forget anything whatsoever. Anyways, pushing on. So, uh, Scott's mother is at parent-teacher conferences, eventually hearing from one of his teachers that evidently Scott needs a father figure in his life to like set him straight. And I would have just been like, you know what, if I was his mother, I'd be like, you know what, well, I'm trying. Go and yourself. Like, literally, I would have told him to go and F himself, because, like, I'm sorry, like, I'm doing the best I can. Freaking, like, whatever that you're going to tell me, like, Mr. Therapist who doesn't know jack crap nothing. Whatever. Like, God, that guy was an a-hole. But supposedly, like, Jackson is, when eventually Jackson's parents just roam around, because we're supposed to understand these characters through the teachers of which that have taught them. Okay, we're supposed to understand more about these characters, I guess. So, Jackson is supposed to be so driven to be, like, number one, the best and whatever, that, like, he can't even see straight. And so obviously, like Jackson's parents is like, hey, he doesn't need to be number one. Like, if anything, he's doing well. Like, but I guess, like, he's just so driven, like, absurdly so. So, when it comes to Lydia's parents, like, they're bickering back and forth. I guess they were divorced or whatever. And so, like, these parents are already, like, once they go to this parent-teacher conference, Lydia's parents are always like, well, how is she, like, the worst student that you've ever had in your life? Like, how is it that she is just doing so poorly that we just have to rein her in? And so this teacher is to say, like, you know what? Like, actually, she's doing, like, way above and beyond anybody. Like, she's at, like, a grade point average of, like, 5.0 or whatever. Like, maybe she needs to be bumped up to better classes, because, and, like, you're who are parents don't even realize that, because I don't even think you take a real, like, interest in your kids, or in your kid, I mean. Allison, I guess, is doing seemingly fine. Like, I don't know, I'm assuming her grades are eventually going to slip because of a certain McCall, but meh, it's bound to happen. So, and also we had, like, Allison's teacher who says, like, yeah, like, she wasn't in class today, so I hope she's feeling good. And Chris is like, see what? Like, my kid wasn't in class today? Maybe I should figure out what's going on there, because I'm going to ground her. It seems like Scott is to also possibly be grounded. Who knows? Like, his mother is never home, because what is really grounded to Scott? Like, being grounded for Scott is just like, blah, like, yeah, whatever you want. Mom who's never home because she works too much. She works too hard to afford any number of things. So it's not her fault. So Scott and Allison are to remember that there's parent-teacher conferences when they're making it back. Scott is like, oh, crap. Like, I should be, like, with my mom at parent-teacher conferences. Ugh. And then, so he's like, when they go to the school, like, Scott is just huddling down because he's like, oh, my God, please don't let her see me. For the love of God, please don't let her see me. So, eventually, while they're to be in this parking lot, everybody's in the parking lot, just kind of, there's to be dust settling and whatever. All of a sudden, we have anarchy just ensued by this mountain lion who just is going around freaking attacking people. And we naturally assume it's the alpha, which it's not. But we have Chris, who ends up having a gun in hand and blowing this thing away. And you know what? If I was to be Allison, I'm like, why is it that all of a sudden my dad has a gun? And why wouldn't have Scott have asked that? Hey, Mr. Argent, why do you have a gun? Just to kind of poke the bear a little bit. Just like, hey, why do you have a gun all of a sudden? Seems kind of weird. Sheriff, do you have any things while you're freaking injured? While you're freaking, like, got hit by some car? Like, do you have any, like, thing about this guy having a gun on him? uh, but yeah, like, I think that is a bulk of what really happens in episode 5. Uh, but I'm sure I'm missing out. There's a lot of stuff that happens in these episodes, but uh, I think the real thing to focus on is the parent teacher conference thing, where we're dissecting some of these people and really find out that they're actually really either smarter than we think they are or dumber than we think they are. Like, we have the sheriff who went into the coach's uh, coach Coach Bobby Finstock's place of uh, analysis, and so this coach is to mention that it seems that really Styles is heavily just not interested in his studies, but supposedly, like, Styles is to do this whole paper in detail about something that was not involved in anything within this class. And so the sheriff is like, well, I guess my son is smart, but, like, I guess that could be a good thing, right? But because the sheriff doesn't even know. And Styles is just disinterested in his classes. Like, I think Styles probably should have been tested to see if he was, like, way smarter than he was, but they never took the time to do anything like that. So Styles is probably just bored in his classes, and he's probably just like, he just needs something to just have something to do that he wants to do, or he's much more interested in doing than what he's really doing in his classes. So there's going to be some couple of people that should probably be tested out to just see if they can, like, be in better different classes for them and maybe graduate a lot quicker than they actually are going to. So I think I covered most of this. Yeah, maybe, no, who knows. Kate. Kate was to go off and go and speak to Derek. So Kate with two men are to go into Derek's home, and Chris evidently wasn't going to probably be too happy for Kate doing this, but Kate didn't care. So Kate makes her way to Derek's place, and Derek is to take out two of Kate's men to leave both Derek and Kate to do some dialogue, because it's not like these guys are really going to be able to do anything because they're just extras. They have some lines here and there, but it's like, dude, you're just going to be, like, dead or whatever, and, like, once you get into this home. So Kate and Derek are to have this talk when Derek just busts out his vampire fangs. And so Derek goes on to try to attack Kate. Kate has this cattle prod, just like, and so Derek goes down, and so Kate goes with the line of, like, I don't know whether I should kiss you or kill you or lick you. And it's like, oh, that's so cringe. Like, I don't know what, like, Kate is to actually be in this show, but, like, she's to be this character that is to be, like, at some points this, like, dominant character, or has to be, like, this kind of, like, this back and forth thing where I'm trying to, like, enigma figuring her out. We also had Kate, who gives Allison her birthday gift because of the problems of which that Kate delivered to both Allison and Scott. To where Kate is like, well, hopefully I didn't up your relationship. Here's this present early. While Allison and Scott were making out in the bedroom of things, and eventually Kate is to tell Allison a little bit more about her heritage, and that evidently her family was known for killing werewolves. But she's not exactly putting 100% two and two together. But anyways, so, but I think that happens in episode 6, reasonably. Well, no, like, because I think Kate is to give Allison a birthday gift early. So, anyways, uh, so Derek is to eventually go on and be electrified by Kate, and so Kate is to ask Derek about the alpha because it's like, well, it's obvious that like you're working with him, right? And then Derek is to give her the signal of just like, well, no. And so Kate is just kind of figuring out by kind of looking at Derek and kind of putting two and two together because Derek just says so much by his eye movement, right? Or his just not saying anything all mentality. Kate is to naturally assume that Derek doesn't know anything about the Alpha at all. So Kate is just to be tempted to just kill Derek because he has no real information to actually give her. Kate is to also tell Derek that, hey, like, we didn't kill your sister like the Alpha did. So to kind of lure you in here, to want you to come here to either, like, take down the Argents or to just come here, so whatever reason. So that pushes Derek on to go to speak with his with the other Hale, Peter Hale, to just kind of like try and get something out of this guy, like a finger movement, a something, to get some kind of signal to help Derek understand what's really going on. And eventually, coincidentally, when Derek is to leave, all of a sudden Peter is to move a finger. So we're like, ooh, maybe we're going to get some answers later on. Whatever. So, in the 6th episode, because we've kind of gotten to that territory anyways. So, the 6th episode is to have Scott, who is going and having his groceries and going into some parking lot. And so Scott is to drop the milk, and all of a sudden we see the milk has a scratch in it and it's rolled back to him. Scott is to naturally assume that it's the Alpha, but instead it's really just Derek, who just is having nothing better to do but to spook the crap out of Scott through this whole entire episode. Just to pop in everywhere, just be the Dracula of this whole story. And so Scott, because his heart is beating quickly because he's running away from the Alpha, Scott decides to just go and jump on every car to start every car alarm, so that way the Alpha won't hear Scott's heartbeat. So, because they go into this whole thing, like, all these werewolves are now Daredevil, and so all of the people can see hear everyone's heartbeat, and can know whether or not they're lying to them. Because we have eventually Derek, who goes to Jackson and is to asking Jackson, like, hey, like, what did you see? And Jackson is like, I didn't see anything. And so Derek is to, like, look into my eyes and, like, tell me slowly that you saw nothing. And Jackson is to say I didn't see anything. And so Derek's like, okay, seems like he's telling the truth. But it seems that also frickin' Jackson is freaking the F out. It seems like he is seeing some shadowy figures within the darkness. It seems like he is barfing up some fingers, because he's finger looking good in this episode. And because he was going to barf into this sink, because Scott is to mention how he's smelling something that is to be decaying or dying within this locker room. And Styles is like, hey man, it's a locker room, it's supposed to smell. Then all of a sudden we see reasonably just Jackson, who's puking up some fingers, because finger looking good. And so like, Jackson is just like, you would think that Jackson would just be like, hey man, there's something really wrong with me, maybe I should figure this out, or maybe I should go to somebody. But no. So In the 6th episode, the main thing that we're to be focusing on here is basically that Scott needs to control or rein in his animalistic side, because Derek is to just easily give up on Scott, because Derek is to say, well, hey, like, I was born of this, and you were scratched into this, you were bitten into this, so like I don't even know if you can be trained, because like I'm lazy and I just don't have the time, I guess. What does Derek have to do? Nothing. Like, just figure it out, buddy. Like, you need this guy, so you need to train him. But in one episode, after episode 5, you've already given up. It's like, I don't even know I can train you because I'm lazy. I have nothing better to do. Come on, Derek. Come on. Like, you've taught 2 kids in Superman and Lois, but you can't teach this guy in Past You? Before you went on to be in Superman and Lois? What's up with that? What's up with that? Come on. Anyways, like, plus also, like, Derek is such a flip flopper. It's ridiculous. We don't even know what is up with this guy. Like, he is all over the gosh darn place. Like, he hates Scott, then he has to team up with him. Then, like, he is to threaten him to death and just tell him, like, he needs to figure all this out, but he doesn't want to train him. Just, God, this guy is all over the god, like, back and forth, flipping around. Good God, keep a story on this guy and keep it consistent. Don't be so flippy flopper with this guy. Good God, no wonder why he got casted as Superman. Because, like, man, you had like 8 bajillion stories in one thing. They couldn't figure out what to do with you. So, like, it must mean that you just are just a guy that can just customize whatever is going on with the story. Because, good God, just go with the flow of things, I guess. Anyways, pushing on. So Styles is to now have to be forced of just going like, well, we're gonna have to like take a the rest of the school day to figure you out, to solve all this. And also we have Derek who's telling Derek is telling Scott that he needs to separate himself from being away with Allison, which just pushes Scott to be more with Allison. And eventually, when he tries to leave through Allison's room, eventually, like going through her window, he eventually thinks that it's Derek, but instead it's actually the Alpha. Scott runs to this car of his to have the Alpha go and put this like weird, bizarre-ish maze visual thing on this guy's window. So the Alpha is just playing with Scott. I'm like, why? Is the Alpha just having fun with this? Like, the Alpha could have just killed every one of these things off and could have been done with all this garbage, because they're going to come after him. No, the Alpha is just like, I just want to play around. I just want to see what happens. Like, nah, like, let's see here. God, the Alpha is so stupid. You could have finished him right then and there. Could have been dead. But no, you're just wanting to play this out. But it seems that eventually, when Derek is to confirm with Scott, like, that he had seen the Alpha, when Scott is to be in, or when Derek is to be into Scott's room, vampiring his way in there, I guess, Scott is to mention to Derek that supposedly he had felt some emotions from the Alpha, and that it was to be anger. But also there was to be that one sigil thing that the Alpha was to put on there. And so Derek knows exactly what that is. And also Scott is to mention, like, well, hey, you buried your sister in that grave and you had the kind of same sigil thing there. Like, what does that mean? And Derek is like, leave it alone. But eventually, towards the end of the episode, Derek is to mention what it actually means. That it means, like, a symbol of revenge. So So now let's concentrate on the whole like Scott and Styles just Incredible Hulk moment. So Styles is to give Scott a heart monitor and to just chuck lacrosse balls at Scott's body numerous times over. Jackson is watching on, is like ha 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 ha, like he's getting his freaking like head chucked in with all these balls. And so Jackson is watching on to see like what's happening here. Scott is to almost change, but then all of a sudden, Scott is to get a rein on it. And so eventually, Styles and Scott are to have a class together. And so all of a sudden, Scott is to be heckled by his teacher, who is also his coach, mentioning that Scott needs to get his grade up because, like, hey man, I can't put you on the team if you have a D right now. You got to get your grade up. And so all of a sudden, this teacher goes on and on and on about and heckles this one student to the point of his supposedly heart racing so much. But then eventually, Styles has noticed that Scott's heart rate is go like drastically down, and he kind of looks underneath the desk to find out that both Allison and Scott are holding hands, which eventually neutralizes the whole thing. So Styles is to figure out that Allison is Scott's anchor, which immediately is to now have like the real test of like, okay, so now that we figure this out, now go on and like fake that you've keyed a car and have these guys beat you up. And now you won't be able to change in public because you'll remember Allison or you'll be concentrating on something else besides actually getting beaten up by people. And plus, also, he will heal. I guess because of that whole moment, Scott and Styles had gone into detention because a teacher had showed up. So Styles is again to be late for his work. And so Derek is to eventually go to Scott's boss, who is Alan. And so Scott is to eventually show up there, but show up there late. And so Derek is to showcase to Alan that there had been this one deer that had this one symbol. And it seems that Alan was to be hiding something. And so that made Derek want to go and tie this guy up, beat him up, interrogate him, wanting to know why, wanting to know the answer. Maybe that this doctor, after all, is to quite possibly be the Alpha. Scott arrives and is to tell Derek to stop beating up this guy. He transforms into the werewolf to basically just tell Derek to stop. So he does. So Scott goes and like kind of heals up this guy's wounds and whichever. So eventually there isn't any real answers here, so they kind of just give up. So eventually what they end up doing instead is Scott is to go on to this loudspeaker and try to rein in the Alpha to the school. And so Scott goes on there and tries to howl, but he sounds like a cat being choked because that's what Styles says. So, like, Scott is like, well, I don't know. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I never know what I'm doing. So, Scott all of a sudden is to have this much more roar, freaking kind of like howl, like, roar, and then, like, that is to be, like, heard throughout, like, the entire school. And so Derek and Styles goes to, Styles and Scott make their way to Derek, and Derek is like, "Hey, are you trying to make the whole town be interested in what is going on here?" And so they're just like, "Well, hey, like, freaking, like, we wanted to get the Alpha's attention, and all of a sudden that gets the Alpha's attention," and so they're just like scrambling off. So, like, I hope I, in a roundabout way, covered most of the things that happened in this episode. But there's two themes in these episodes where I'm just kind of like, man, they are kind of just stretching these episodes. Kind of feels like filler because they just have an idea for an episode. They just go with the Incredible Hulk kind of episode, which is like, okay, let's take a whole entire time to just kind of just do this twice to figure out if this works. And so that will be the whole thing of the episode, where also both Scott and Styles have to kind of make amends for what had happened, and so on and so forth. So with that said, I think I've covered a bulk of what happens in episode 5 and 6, but not everything. There's bound to be something that I forgot, or there's something that I might have said for episode 5 that happened in episode 6, because that's bound to happen, like the whole like necklace thing. Um, but yeah, we have Allison so interested in eventually finding out more about her family's history within this story or book or whatever, that she ends up telling Linda about it. And there's a to be a picture like that looks basically like the alpha, and Linda sees it and she's like, oh, like, yeah, it looks like a very big wolf. And Allison evidently is to have a free period, so she's just sitting next to some locker, I guess, until her period is over. I'm like, I'm sorry, but here's the thing. I like I don't quite get free like periods in class. Like evidently there's so many, like, I know for me, I always was to try to like maybe have study hall like during those times when I had nothing left to do. But like there was always, you had to do something. Like it's not like you could just leave for the day because like you had like but some people must have just been like procrastin or non-procrastinators or whatever, and got like just everything just banged out and freaking didn't even need to do much of like electives or whatever. I don't know. Maybe people were too smart for their own good. Maybe they did summer school to where they could just like freaking like alleviate some of the crappy classes. I don't know. Anyways, so uh, but yeah, so Jackson and Allison have this moment, and so Jackson is trying to like apologize to Allison and to Scott about what he had done. That Jackson was trying to say that like he was supposedly like numero uno to everybody, and so would eventually Scott was to come in and just be like everyone that everyone is cheering for. Jackson just kind of just felt that it's like that's why he should be angry with Scott. That's the reason why he should be angry with Allison, because Allison is connected to Scott. So he's just trying to, I guess, mend fences, or maybe eventually also try and put a love triangle between Allison and Jackson and Scott, just to kind of like see how we can play this all out. To where Jackson is going to be much more of a friend to Allison. Maybe there's all of a sudden going to be some problems in the love connection area, let's just say. So, anyways, I'm going to get out of here. I hope I covered everything, but I'll forget. I know I'll forget something. I'll probably bring whatever up in the next time that I review this. Just be like, oh yeah, I guess this was an important thing that I didn't think about because I didn't like bother to, like, I didn't think this was an important part, but evidently they made it important. Uh, I'm kind of hoping that Linda is to eventually have us find out that she has some scratch or some scar or some whatever from the alpha, to find out that she was actually going to be turned and be like this alpha werewolf. Uh, and like, because I know there's somewhere down the road where something happens to Lydia, but I can't exactly say what that is, because I think that's quite a stretch down the road somewhere. Um, but foreshadowing, I guess. There's something going to happen with Lydia, so we'll see what that is. So, it also seems like Lydia's eyes are to get blackened, which I'm assuming that that probably has nothing to do with drugs. I'm assuming that probably might have something to do with something else, because she had to put makeup on to cover up her blackened eyes. So I'm like, okay, what does that mean? So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Lydia somewhere down the road. So that said, I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.